It was a star-studded night for the premiere of 20th Century Fox's $25 million motion picture, Hello, Dolly. The Klieg lights were bright at Grauman's Chinese Theater, signaling the kind of synthetic hoopla that has traditionally launched many a Hollywood extravaganza. There were fans and autograph hounds, even a fleet of antique studio Rolls-Royces for names that have lost their relevance for most of today's movie audience. The truth is that a movie star no longer assures the financial success of a picture.
1967 and 68, which is where the industry bent. What happened was that there were big money productions. And they started almost taking the studios down with them. There was a period there where Paramount was going to go under, or 20th was selling off part of its lot, and there was general panic in the industry.
The king had died. There wasn't anybody at home in the studios. There wasn't any Louis B. Mayer or Zanuck. This was just coming off of the end of the period when actors were contracted to studios and directors and writers. When that all broke up in the mid to late 60s, people started taking those studios over, and they would turn to the filmmakers.
Young directors knew something that they didn't know, which was maybe what the audiences were looking for. And so there was this climate which made it possible for me to make a lot of movies, which I know I couldn't get made now.
What are you doing, Alice?
I'm getting undressed. Alice. Relax. Oh, relax.
Stop it, Alice.
Screw me. I am being honest. I am doing what I feel like doing. Well, what do you feel like doing? I feel like doing what we came up here to do. And what is that? Orgy! Have an orgy! Orgy!
There was a different audience, wasn't there? There was a new audience. There was an audience that the studios didn't even know existed.
Socket tube.
It was an audience that had been politicized by Vietnam and Watergate, whose consciousness had been changed with drugs. I think that's very important. And it was an open audience.
Every single standard or consensus, if you will, by which we'd lived our lives up to the 60s got questioned. Every one. What was authority, what was virtue, what was heroism, what was sexuality, what was male, what was female.
And it was fueled partly by the music being created in the late 60s, the hippie movement. It was the blossoming of the counterculture movement that had started with Kerouac and the Beats, now picked up through the dissent over Vietnam, the honest difference of opinion and questioning of our government's motives, to the civil rights movement, questioning this injustice. Then a women's movement grew out of the political movements, and so suddenly girls who were helping the guys in protesting in Berkeley were saying, wait, why do I have to get the coffee all the time? What, let's carry it the next step.
The 70s was the first time we could celebrate the freedoms won from the 50s and 60s with our art, where whites could go see James Brown and Tina Turner and not be called a nigger lover. Jimi Hendrix could play white rock and roll and not be called an Uncle Tom.
The people that go to the movies were looking for something that was more meaningful to them than the glitz of the 60s films.
It wanted to deal with difficult films and see difficult films and different films, and it didn't want the same old stuff like nowadays, where the same old stuff is just repeated and repeated. And it wanted to be challenged, and it wanted to be surprised.
Does your personal religion or philosophy include a life after death? Oh, yes, indeed. That's absolutely. Did you enjoy life when you were a child? Oh, yes, you were a wonderful baby, Harold. Do you think the sexual revolution has gone too far? It certainly has. Do you find the idea of wife swapping distasteful? I even find the question distasteful. Do you enjoy... Harold, please.
Hollywood films hadn't changed for a long, long time. You measured in many ways your pleasure at movies from the distance they lived from your own life. You know, you watch Ingrid Bergman walking up a fog and shrouded ramp to a plane and Bogart waving goodbye. You knew this was never going to happen to you, ever. That started to change, again, with these revolutions that happened in the 60s. People wanted something that they recognized, that was part of them. It wasn't the distance from your life that was the appealing thing. In many ways, it was the recognition that that was a part of your life.
Ben, what are you doing?
Well, I would say that I'm just drifting here in the pool.
Why?
Well, it's very comfortable just to drift here.
Have you thought about graduate school?
No.
Would you mind telling me then what those 4 years of college were for? What was the point of all that hard work?
You got me.
If you're coming out of the drug revolution and the sex revolution and the civil rights revolution, you've got a lot of attitude on, you know. and you've been taking on the military-industrial complex. You've been taking on all kinds of religious structures, you know. You've been involved in protests. And so you have those tools, that arrogance and that self, how do you say it, self-confidence, just to say, I know what we should be doing. I know what we should be doing about Vietnam. I know what we should be doing about where it's right. And I know what we should be doing about motion pictures.
Of course, we thought that movies could make the world better and could illuminate contemporary life, and that artists didn't have to just be employees, that artists could be, stand with the other leaders of society and contribute.
No one's saying anything. Let's say something. Let's make stories about what is. There's so much going on. What are we feeling? That's what I was going through, you know. I was feeling artistic.
Film business was, a decadent, decaying, emptied whorehouse, and it had to be assaulted. And so you had that student film mentality that, let's pick up the banner of Godard and walk in there and take it over.
Hey, think the time is right for a violent revolution. 'Cause where I live, the game to play is compromise solution. When the white down for a do, set the same for a rock and roll band. Come and sleep in London town, there's just no place for honest man. No.
The European films of the 60s, those were the most powerful influences on American filmmakers at that time.
French New Wave, the Italian New Wave, films from Japan, which were extraordinary. Films from Russia was still extraordinary.
I was certainly influenced by Bergman and Fellini.
The Fellinis and the Godards and the De Sicas.
Rossellini and De Sica.
Rossellini first, and then Fellini, Visconti.
Truffaut and Romer.
Sotogiant Ray.
Or Rene, let's say, or Godard.
The major influence on me was Antonioni.
Bertolucci was a big big influence on me.
My favorite was Buñuel, actually.
There's Renoir, and then there's everybody else.
I loved Bergman. I loved Kurosawa.
And then also Kurosawa.
Kurosawa?
Kurosawa and the Ozu and some of the other Japanese directors.
The filmmakers that influenced me the most, I don't know their names, because I would go see a film and I hate it, and I'd say, I gotta remember never to do anything like that again.
In the 60s and 70s, every major college campus and the area around on Friday nights was full of kids going to foreign films.
La Dolce Vita, which was big news for the California film campuses. Everyone was talking about La Dolce Vita, and Roman Polanski, who was a film student in Poland, had made Knife in the Water, greatly admired.
Using handheld, the way they were using grainy black and white, the way they were expressing things, the little stories, the human events, they were all very moving to me.
We were tremendously conscious that these people like Fellini and Godard and Antonioni and others were working in a different way of storytelling that we were.
Breaking out of the seamless style of the classical cinema of Hollywood, which we all loved, but was a part of, seemed to be a part of another world, in a way. And this world was new and open, and anything was possible.
One thing that Godard said, which really affected me, he said, you know, you can, the way you can beat the studio system is by locking them inside their studios and going out and shooting in the street, because the whole world's a soundstage and they're pretending it's all inside their building.
Truffaut's fluid camera was an extraordinary experience, and the handheld sort of quality, the rough quality. I mean, I realized that you could do almost anything if your heart and your spirit was in the right place for the movie that you were making.
These were new forms. This was a new way of storytelling. The concepts and the execution were highly original. Now, they may have had their roots in American filmmaking of another period, but it was not disguised so much as transformed.
I was influenced by the European filmmakers' affection for American films. Their point was that in the studio system, despite the factory-like nature of the business, there were those filmmakers whose personality transcended all events, and whose personality you could feel in the work, no matter who wrote it, no matter who produced it, or in fact, no matter who was in it. You know, Hawks's movies are very personal to him and reflected very much his particular code of behavior, his code of honor, his philosophy of life, his attitude toward men and women. And yet, it was always done within the framework of a story and a movie that, you know, that you didn't have to be initiated into to follow.
When the French decided to discover us, in my view, they discovered our crap. They didn't discover our great movies. I've never read a serious Cahiers de Cinema piece on Willy Wyler or Billy Wilder. Each of them had the highest level of work of almost any director I can think of. The sheer quality, one after another, after another, after another. The work of American directors over the years has been absolutely, it's movies.
Everything is linked in these discussions, so you then have to go back to the golden age of television, which had happened in the late 40s, early 50s, out of which John Frankenheimer and Lumet and Arthur Penn. And so the generation of the 70s, as always, was standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, John Frankenheimer was a giant. I mean, his work that he did as a 26-year-old, live television, which was a more cinema-style live television, that was amazing work that will stand forever as great cinema. And it was done live. It was one day, one shot, you know, figure it out. How did they do it even? Arthur Penn was a theater director. He was very admired, and I mean, for myself as a theater student, really looked up to Arthur Penn and was very impressed with even the earlier films he had made.
When I had first read the Benton and Newman script, they had been influenced by Seeing Jules and Jim, by French cinema, who in turn had been influenced by its love of old American gangster movies, and the two reached a sort of confluence.